What's going on, guys? Welcome into the Chiefs Zone podcast. I am Farzin Vasugian. Thank you for joining me on this edition of the Chiefs Zone podcast, the first in the month of August. Yes, we are in the month of August, which means football season is pretty much here. We've had training camp for a couple of weeks now. We had our first preseason game last week, and now all 32 NFL teams will play this weekend. So football is back in our lives, and we're going to get the first Chiefs preseason game later this week. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll dive into it more during the Red Friday live chat. This, of course, Red Friday during the Q&A live chat. But before we get to that, obviously some Chiefs news to go over. Most recently, including the injury involving Rashee Rice. How serious is it? What do we know about that injury? And also, a former Raiders head coach once again at Chiefs training camp. We'll talk about that as well. Travis Kelce spoke to the media today. He had something that I think every Chiefs fan would like to hear regarding his mental state going into the 2025 season. Like I said, we'll talk about the upcoming preseason game. What should we watch out for? Who should we keep an eye on? I have several players that I'm going to keep a close eye on in this game. Also, big news involving ESPN. They've been making some big splashes here, landing NFL Red Zone and WWE PLEs. This is getting a lot of attention from people. ESPN, they were already a big player. They just became an even bigger player in the sports media broadcasting industry, and no one might be able to do anything about it. We'll talk about all of that, what that means here on this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. I'm Farzin Vasugian. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Hope you're all having a great week. Enjoying all the Chiefs content coming your way. And of course, we'll have our first preseason game this Saturday when the Chiefs play the Arizona Cardinals. If you guys want to attend that game or any other Chiefs, any other NFL game, any other sporting event, concert for that matter, all you have to do is go visit my friends over at SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the place where I go to for all of my sports ticketing needs. I got my Chiefs tickets. I got my KU football tickets, other sporting events, Royals games that I went to this year, all courtesy of my friends over at SeatGeek. If you're a new SeatGeek customer, you can use my promo code Farzin and save $20 off your first purchase from SeatGeek. Go to SeatGeek.com, pick your tickets, and at checkout, new customers can enter my promo code Farzin and save $20 off their first order from SeatGeek. All right. I see a lot of you guys tuning in on Facebook, X, YouTube, Instagram. Appreciate you guys. Join the conversation as we go on throughout the night. I want to hear from you guys. Any topic we discuss. Chiefs training camp continuing on here. So for today's practice, it was actually kind of interesting. By the way, the first week of Chiefs training camp, not a lot of people in attendance for the weekday practices, but dude, Chiefs fans showing up since then. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it doesn't matter. I thought those were going to be like the quiet. Remember how Kansas City Royals games used to look in like the 2000s? Especially like in September when nobody cared anymore by that point and everyone was focused on football. Yeah. I thought Chiefs training camp was going to look like that on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. Not at all, man. I mean, it looks like a game. It looks like a Chiefs playoff game at Arrowhead out there. You got people, even when the Chiefs were setting up for 11 on 11 and 7 on 7 drills. I mean, that's really the big part of practice that people like to watch and enjoy. Dude, there were still people coming in and practice. Today was kind of a weird day because they weren't quite sure if they were going to let fans in or not. They waited about 20 minutes before actually opening the gates than the original scheduled time because of a storm that was on its way. They chose to wait a very long time just to eventually kick fans out. Some fans were actually still making their way in, and whoever didn't make their way in, they just had to turn around and go back to their cars. I'm curious, for those who were there today that didn't get a chance to go in, did you get your refund for parking? I'm curious if anyone bothered to do that. I mean, it's what, $7 to park there? It's not going to break your bank, but I can also understand anyone that might not want to pay for something when they didn't get a chance to go inside. But I'm curious how that process works. But anyway, practice ended early As far as the outdoor portion goes, the Chiefs went indoors due to lightning, and then eventually we got the downpour in St. Joe. I believe it made its way over to KC as well about an hour later, and the fans were asked to leave. So, what are you going to do about it? We'll get into some of the practice highlights and all that stuff, but the big story today involving the Kansas City Chiefs is the Rashee Rice injury. This was actually a surprise to a lot of people. Nobody really saw this coming. This was a surprise to a lot of people as Rice was making his way through the media tent. The way the Chiefs walked down that hill from the training facility over at Missouri Western and on their way to the field. A lot of people were surprised. Rashee Rice was without pads, without his helmet, all of that stuff. And he was hanging out with Hollywood Brown, Drew Tranquil, a couple of the other players who are who deal with the training staff during practice when they're not able to practice with the team. The word is it's a groin injury. Hollywood Brown's dealing with an ankle injury. The word was Hollywood could have came back as early as last week. We haven't even seen him back, and it's been a week. Sky Moore was dealing with a hamstring injury. But right now, you have Rashee Rice, who, at the moment, he is on the shelf due to a groin injury. How concerned are we about this? We don't know the severity of this. There's really little information provided. I believe Spags was the coach who spoke today to the media. Usually assistant coaches don't have that kind of information. It's usually just the head coaches that provide that to the media. In terms of specific details, I will say this. There is a little bit of a concern here because your three main wide receivers, what have I been saying for a long time? This time last year, all the talk was about Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, this trio. And by the way, they haven't even played a snap together, all three of them at the same time. And the amount of rapport these three have together, I mean, they're pretty close. One of the big reasons Hollywood Brown came back to Kansas City is because of how close he got to Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. But all three of those guys, they've all suffered injuries in training camp. Xavier Worthy had that head injury, and I want to be clear, not a concussion. He was in the concussion protocol, but was never diagnosed with a concussion. If he was diagnosed with a concussion, he would not have come back as early as he did. Then you had Hollywood Brown the same day. I believe that was last Tuesday, if I recall correctly. You had Hollywood Brown, who dealt with an ankle injury. Jordan Schultz of Bleacher Report said he could have came back as early as last Wednesday, and now 7 days have passed. We haven't seen Hollywood since then. So I'm not questioning the source, what he told him. I'm just questioning I guess how valid that source is, because we're not seeing Hollywood back right now. He's still on the bike in the training tent. And now you have Rashee Rice, who's dealing with this groin injury, and we don't know the severity of this. The three main wide receivers have all suffered injuries at some point. Now, to be clear, Xavier Worthy is back in practicing with the Chiefs. That's good news. Sky Moore also back in practicing with the Chiefs. I know he's not considered a big name wide receiver on this team, but right now you do have some concerns with what's going on at that wide receiver position. This is what the Chiefs dealt with last year. And sure, they still won 15 games, but I think offensively, you certainly would have liked to see a better offensive output. And it would have made a big difference if you had your wide receivers. I think the offensive line has been the bigger focus. You need improvement there for sure, especially with the tackles. And we've talked about that quite a lot this offseason. But man, I mean, you'd like to have your primary wide receivers. I mean, we heard all last year how in OTAs and in training camp, Patrick Mahomes, Hollywood Brown, dude, they had a rhythm going together. And they've had it going in this training camp as well. But he's right now sidelined. And that's a big concern right now because we don't know when he's coming back. Again, that report from Jordan Schultz of Fox Sports, who is one of the better insiders out there today, has certainly made a name for himself in the last year or two. Definitely when he had his little incident with Rappaport, but neither here nor there. But he's a good source for news. The fact that he said that last week and we haven't seen Hollywood Brown back yet, a little bit of a concern. Not hitting the panic button yet. Now, I've said this about Rashee Rice before. When the news came about his legal situation, came to a settlement, 5 years probation, 30 days jail, I did say it would not be the worst thing in the world if Rashee Rice started the 2025 season with a suspension. I know your first 4 games, boy, I mean, that is quite the first 4 weeks for Kansas City, because you're going to be dealing with the Chargers at a neutral playing field. You've got the Eagles at home. You also have the Ravens in week 4. That's quite a stretch there. Now, that's not going to make or break your season. And I still think Kansas City, Kansas City had a tough schedule last year. They always have a tough schedule. Remember the 3 games in 11 days last year? They went 3-0 in all of them. And there were some concerns there that maybe Buffalo would move ahead of Kansas City during those 3 games in 11 days. Nope, didn't happen. Kansas City found a way. Kansas City will find a way. But it is preferred to have your key guys out there. But I will say this about Rice. And I know he's been going full speed with the Chiefs in training camp so far, and that his knee's 100% and all, but would not be the worst thing in the world if he started the season with a 4-game suspension, even more so now that he's dealing with this groin injury. And again, we don't know the severity of it. It's August the 6th. The Chiefs have a little over a month before their first game of the season. I'm not exactly sure what happened. Yeah, I see a couple of you guys asking what happened with the injury. I have no idea. Obviously, you're hoping for the best. What's the Chiefs' schedule like this week? Tomorrow is Thursday. Friday, I believe, is their day off. That's going to be their travel day to Arizona for the preseason game on Saturday. Robert, I see your question. Any starters playing the preseason game? So Andy Reid will talk tomorrow. Usually the starters play a series in that first preseason game, and we'll get into that a little later on, how much we need to see from the starters and whatnot. Andy Reid will speak to the media tomorrow. That is my guess. And at that point, there are a lot of questions that need to be asked regarding what's going on. By the way, shout out to Giant Keys Jeter. I hope I said that right, on Instagram, saying that they do give refund for the parking fee. Okay, good to know. I mean, listen, I'm not going to contact them doing that. I was able to go and still get some footage, able to watch some practice. I'm not going to go say anything about $7, but for those who do, I completely understand. Especially if you didn't get into the facility, yeah, you definitely should ask for a refund. I mean, come on. A lot of people are driving from Kansas City and other areas, at least an hour or two, to get to St. Joe. But as far as the Rice deal goes, listen, I'm not hitting the panic button yet, but I do have my concerns right now with the wide receiver position again, because we saw this last year. And now with the Rice injury, I'm kind of finding myself saying, here we go again, man. We had this last year. Now, to be clear, none of these are, as far as we know, nothing is supposed to be long-term. But assuming Andy Reid speaks to the media tomorrow, dude, whoever's in that media tent right there, and listen, I've said this before and I'll say it again, the media in Kansas City, especially those in sports, they don't ask the best set of questions. You got to ask, what's the severity of the Hollywood Brown injury? What's the timetable for that? How serious is the Rashee Rice injury right now? Because we don't know what happened. We don't know if this was something that happened in practice, outside of practice, in the weight room. Like, what happened? We have no idea. I'm not sure exactly what to think of that until we get further information. I will say this. Because of the injuries we have lining up with the wide receivers at the moment, this does make it more important for the Chiefs that they get the most out of Tyquan Thornton, who, by the way, thrived in Tuesday's practice, making all kinds of plays. Mahomes, his connection to him, perfect dart down the field to Thornton, making another play to Thornton. They got involved quite a lot. And in the portion of practice we saw today, before today being Wednesday, for those listening later, not on the live portion of the podcast, Tyquan Thornton and Patrick Mahomes, offense only or in one-on-one situations, they were getting involved again. Tyquan Thornton starting to get involved more. Before yesterday's practice, Tyquan Thornton, he was out there making some flashy plays here and there. Now he's starting to get more involved. And it probably has a lot to do with the fact that Sky Moore missed a few practices. Hollywood Brown has missed a week of practices. Now you have Rashee Rice, who did not practice today. Tyquan Thornton's been getting involved quite a lot with the Chiefs offense lately in practice. And this is someone I am definitely curious to see in Saturday's preseason game against the Cardinals. We'll get into that preseason game later on. I see you guys in the chat. By the way, anything you guys have, you guys want to ask me or respond to any of my comments, please chime in below. And a reminder, we will have the Red Friday Q&A live chat this week as well. That'll be the eve of the first preseason game for the Chiefs. So we'll have a lot to discuss that evening as well. But this does make it more important for a guy like Tyquan Thornton, who recently has been getting more involved. Jalen Royals has been getting involved a lot with the Chiefs in training camp, to my own surprise, too. Because you have Worthy, you have Rice, you have Hollywood Brown at the time before all those injuries started to stack up. Travis Kelce, Noah Gray. Gray's been getting involved a lot. We talked about this recently. With the injuries that are lining up right now, and again, you're hoping for the best, but you never know if the worst happens, because we saw what happened last year. I think the Chiefs are trying to stack up on the depth chart here in case anything like that happens again with the wide receivers, because let's be honest, you don't want to rely on a guy like Sky Moore. Listen, I know Sky Moore is trying to fight hard, and he's made a couple of plays in camp, nothing too flashy, but you don't want to rely on Sky Moore as your primary receiver. You just don't. Tyquan Thornton, he certainly has a skill set to thrive in Andy Reid's offensive scheme. Jalen Royal seems like he's understanding what's expected of him in this offense. You're seeing a little bit of Rashee Smith showing off his speed at the running back position in this offense. Hopefully it doesn't come down to that. Hopefully those guys are depth guys who will contribute here and there. You still want your primary guys, but I think more so, more than now, Thornton's presence for Saturday's preseason game does become very important. So we'll see what the Chiefs do there. I mentioned Rashee Smith. He's been showing off his speed. We've seen him do that in one-on-one drills, 7-on-7, 11-on-11, showcase that speed he possesses. I think Smith is really a mirror image of Pacheco, especially with kind of the things they have in common. Rashee Smith had a 4.39 40, the third fastest 40 time this year among running backs at the scouting combine. Let's go back to 2022, because the Chiefs got Tyquan Thornton. Didn't get him in 2022. They got him late last year. Thornton had the fastest 40 time of any offensive player in 22, and now he's with the Chiefs. Also from 22, the Chiefs, as you remember, they drafted Isaiah Pacheco. He had a 4.37 40 time. That tied for the fastest 40 time among running backs in the 2022 scouting combine, tying with Pierre Strong. For those who don't know, Pierre Strong was drafted in the 4th round by New England. He only lasted 1 year there. He's now with the Browns. He's been there for a couple of years, in fact. So obviously the Chiefs got the better of the two guys who had the fastest 40 time among running backs that year. Again, I think the Chiefs, they're trying to have all these backup plans in place in case of injuries happening again. We had the injury bug last year. Was not fun to watch. But the Chiefs are trying to prepare themselves in case that happens again. They've got some depth at wide receiver right now. Hopefully everyone's available. I'm not anticipating Rice to be available, more so for the suspension than injury. But if the groin injury is anything serious, well, at least they'll have that suspension to recover. And for crying out loud, I know someone was saying it earlier, NFL, get your shit together, man. Just get the suspension over with. Obviously, you would have loved it last year while he was injured, but that's not the way things work, of course, because the legal case was still going on. But Rashard Smith, I mean, listen, just let's be aware here. The Chiefs probably aren't going to pay any of their running backs big money in the future. They did re-sign Kareem Hunt on a very team-friendly deal. They signed Elijah Mitchell. Isaiah Pacheco has 1 year left on his rookie deal. Those three running backs I just mentioned have 1 year left with the Chiefs. They could come back, sure. Well, but we'll see. Rashard Smith at the moment, though, that's a guy on a rookie deal. They just drafted him, so he's going to be around for a couple of years. And it wouldn't surprise me if he ultimately replaces Isaiah Pacheco. Just kind of depends on the type of season Isaiah Pacheco has, of course. But Rashard Smith is another guy that's certainly been getting a lot of attention in training camp lately. Speaking of someone who got some attention in Chiefs training camp, there is another former Raiders coach in St. Joe. Obviously, you guys remember last year, John Gruden, former Raiders head coach, he was present in St. Joe for several days as like a guest assistant coach for the Chiefs. Well, that pissed off Raiders fans. Raiders fans were not thrilled at all. And I get all these people saying, no, you're just making shit up. I love when Raiders fans accuse me of fake news, even though I had the screenshots of the tweets from Raiders fans. In addition, I also had the link to those tweets. But yeah, somehow I make up fake news. It's always interesting how that works. Guess who was at Raiders training camp today? Or not Raiders training, Chiefs training camp today? Antonio Pierce. Remember Antonio Pierce, the guy who said that they have the recipe to beat Patrick Mahomes and got swept by the Chiefs? Yeah, that Antonio Pierce was at Chiefs training camp, and he was wearing Chiefs red. This is the second year in a row a former Raiders head coach was at Chiefs training camp. I don't know how long Pierce is going to be there for. By the way, I've got to be honest, I had no idea AP was not employed. I thought for sure he was a defensive assistant somewhere in the NFL. Turns out, no, he is a free agent coach. I don't know if this is permanent, temporary, what this is with the Chiefs right now, but he's there for now. Just like Gruden last year, wearing Chiefs gear and working closely with the defense. Obviously, Antonio Pierce has a very close connection to Steve Spagnuolo. We heard Spags last year just talk about AP, how happy he was for him and that opportunity and whatnot. Unfortunately for AP, he wasn't even the head coach for 365 days, the full-time head coach. Obviously, he was the interim after they fired Josh McDaniels. But yeah, he had a very short-lived run. And that guy was supposed to be the savior of the Raiders organization. That did not last long. This is the same guy who said he hates the color red for obvious reasons. I mean, I get it. He was with the Raiders at the time. And again, like I mentioned earlier, this is the same guy who went on Max Crosby's podcast, which, by the way, Max Crosby was aggressively campaigning for AP to be the head coach last year. And shortly after the Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year, not this past year, but the year before, in Allegiant Stadium at the Raiders home stadium, the same stadium where the Chiefs are undefeated, AP said that the Raiders have the recipe to beat Mahomes. Why? Because they won on Christmas. And listen, you never make any apologies for winning. But let's be completely honest. It's not like the Raiders did anything in that game. Mahomes had the worst 7 seconds of his career, allowing 2 defensive touchdowns. And again, like I said, you don't ever apologize for that kind of thing in sports. Wins are never easy to come by. You saw the Chiefs, all of their one possession wins last year. You never apologize for those kinds of things. But let's be completely honest. That Christmas game where the Raiders won at Arrowhead, that was more so the Chiefs shooting themselves on the foot more than anything else. So for him to say, oh, well, we have the recipe. And by the way, I don't care if both of them were one possession victories for the Chiefs. If you say you have the recipe to beat Patrick Mahomes, you better sweep. You didn't even split the series. Went 0-2 against the Chiefs. And what do you know? You find yourself, I'm guessing temporarily, part of the Chiefs coaching staff. Oh, how fast life comes at you, man. By the way, for all these Raiders fans, once again, crying about loyalty and how I guess John Gruden on Hard Knocks, when the Raiders were on there, talked about how once a Raider, always a Raider, forever a Raider, that kind of thing. And Raiders fans were upset about that. They're like, oh, we just went out. Why would John Gruden want to be loyal to the Raiders after they forced him to resign? Because by forcing him to resign rather than firing him, you don't have to pay him the amount of money left on that contract. I mean, that's the thing. Go look up Charlie Weiss, how much money he made from KU and Notre Dame in 2015, not coaching a single game. But the Raiders made John Gruden quit so that way they don't have to pay him. And now Raiders fans were expecting Antonio Pierce to be loyal to the Raiders. Why? They only gave him 1 year, and you expect that guy to be loyal to the Raiders franchise? Listen, I suppose when Pete Carroll's available, you certainly make that move. But do you really expect someone to be loyal to your franchise when they didn't even get a fair shot? I mean, unless something was happening behind the scenes that nobody knows about, why do you listen? No one's ever going to accuse Raiders fans of having any kind of knowledge about anything, especially football related. But let's use a little bit of common sense here. I mean, this is not mental gymnastics here. Do you really expect that guy to want to do things only to acquiesce to the Raiders franchise? Come on, like let's be honest here. Jeremy says he was a bad hire anyway. See, here's my problem with that hire. That dude went from being a linebackers coach to a head coach. Good luck when you do that kind of thing. I mean, Zach Taylor in Cincy, and listen, Cincy has great talent, but I think any head coach would be able to thrive with that talent there. Zach Taylor was never a coordinator prior to taking that Bengals job. If I'm not mistaken. Like sometimes teams make really questionable decisions. I get. Joe says that team will kiss you. Yeah, I mean recently the players are kissing each other on the foreheads, I guess, or former players. Last year you had players playing with puppets at training camp, Raiders training camp, that is. Listen, I mentioned this before. I just don't know what the culture is like there. You have Damon Arnett who did his crap, and then Henry Ruggs, a very unfortunate incident. Gruden, I don't know, man. Like things in Raiderland just don't seem to be going the way they should. Maybe there's a reason why they haven't won a playoff game in 23 years, the second longest drought in the NFL right now. I mean, I don't know. Duncan says, when am I going to do a 53-man roster projection? Great question, Duncan. It is coming very soon, actually. Expected as early as tomorrow. David says, when do we find out about Rice's suspension? Dude, none of us know. My prediction, and I know you guys said as well, 2 to 4 games. I think people are going to be really surprised. It's not going to be as hefty as a suspension as some expect. I mean, there have been players who have done worse. And don't get me wrong, what Rice did was bad. I criticized that the very first day that footage came out. What Rice did was bad. But for people expecting like a year-long suspension, calm down. We've seen players do worse and get less punishment. But yeah, as far as the roster projection, I'll have one right before that first preseason game. So stay tuned for that. Travis Kelce spoke to the media today. He had a lot to say. A lot of positive things about Kansas City, wanting to stay here, all that stuff. Dude, anytime Travis Kelce does a press conference, we should do like an over-under. What's like the over-under on retirement questions or future questions? Dude, Travis Kelce gets asked the same damn questions every time. Do you think you're going to come back? Do you think about the future? Dude, he's answered that question like 20 times every offseason. Like, and by the way, the same media that's there every single practice, they're the same ones asking this. Like, can you at least get a little creative with the questions? Listen, I'm not trying to bag on the media. This is my second time criticizing our local media and all, but ask better questions. Come on. Like, this is not difficult. Every Travis Kelce press conference is so freaking exhausting. It's like the same damn thing. You might as well just have Travis Kelce's retirement press conference now. That's like how focused the media is on Travis Kelce's retirement. They keep asking it every single time he's available. I'm sorry, but that's just too funny. But neither here nor there. To move on from that, I do want to talk about what he said, and I think this is pretty important here. He was asked about Super Bowl 59. His response, quote, "I've thrown that thing in the trash. I've moved on. I was pretty focused on this year in the offseason." Dude, if I'm a Chiefs fan, that's what I want to hear. Remember 2 years ago when the Chiefs beat the Eagles? And all the complaints about the field conditions, which by the way, are still being brought up to this date. It's like, first of all, the Eagles just whooped Kansas City in the Super Bowl, and some Eagles fans, I don't want to say all, some are still complaining about the field conditions from 2 years ago. But it's one thing when a fan complains about it, but when one of the players complained about it right around this time 2 years ago, it's like, dude, it's training camp. It's August. You're still focused on a Super Bowl loss? Like, if Travis Kelce was like, yeah, man, we were bad in that game, we did not look good, it's like, okay, I'd be a little concerned. It's like, wait, is that still on your mind? And don't get me wrong, I'm sure that's still something they're very well aware of about what happened. But his focus to get away from that Super Bowl, I like to hear that, because you have to be in the right mental state. Listen, we saw the Chiefs and what happened in Super Bowl 55. Did the Chiefs just roll over and feel sorry for themselves? No. Yeah, I mean, 31-9. Offensive line did no favors for the Chiefs, albeit it was all backups. The pass catchers sure as hell did not do Mahomes any favors in that one. But did Mahomes and the entire team feel sorry for themselves? No. They went and they did something about it. They went and got better. Now, sure, right away they did not return to the Super Bowl, but they got back pretty quickly, did they not? And by the way, I've said this before, so I'm not saying anything groundbreaking here about the Chiefs. But we are all very well aware that the Chiefs, and I saw, and I want to source the proper person here that tweeted this. Warren Sharp from Sharp Football does a lot of great stuff regarding football analytics. He said Patrick Mahomes, he put this tweet out today. Patrick Mahomes is the only QB with a winning record when the Chiefs are trailing entering the fourth quarter over the last 5 years. Patrick Mahomes has a 667 win percentage. The next player is Lamar Jackson at 412. 667, huge gap, 412. It's Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Tua, Stafford, Cousins, Herbert, Geno Smith, CJ Stroud, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, and then Josh Allen at 176. Joe Burrow's later down there at 148. Baker is at 138. Love is at 133. Deshaun Watson at 053. I still remember wanting him over Mahomes. Boy, I'm glad the Chiefs made the better decision there for many reasons. But the point I'm trying to bring up by bringing up this stat line here, this is a Chiefs team that just does not roll over and quit. Remember when they were trailing 24-0 against the Texans in the playoffs? They scored 28 points in one quarter. That was not the only time the Chiefs had ever scored 28 points in one quarter. They did it against the Raiders. That was in the regular season, the same season as the 24-0 deficit. They were trailing 10-0 in that Raiders game. They were trailing 24-0 in that Texans game, the playoff game. And they scored 28 points in the second quarter of both of those games. This Chiefs team, even before Patrick Mahomes arriving, this Chiefs team always finds a way to push through. Now, they don't always come from behind. Some games they lose. But, dude, you can't ever write off the Chiefs. Prior to Super Bowl 59, Patrick Mahomes had never lost a game when trailing by 10 points. Exactly 10 points, to be clear. And that's excluding PATs, like before a PAT. This is a Chiefs football team that's not going to just quit or feel bad for themselves that they got whooped in a game. We saw what happened in Super Bowl 55. And by the way, I know this has been brought up before. The Chiefs have been to the AFC Championship game at the very least every single year with Mahomes as their starting quarterback. Whatever Kansas City's worst season is in the Mahomes era, is still better than 99% of the NFL teams. I mean, what is Kansas City's worst season? I guess how you measure that could vary. Some people will look at stats and they'll say the year where the Chiefs led the league in drops, that was Mahomes' worst season. Okay. That's reasonable, I guess. How did that year end, by the way? Oh, yeah, they won the Super Bowl. Now, maybe you measure that kind of thing by saying how far they got. Okay, well, the 2 times they didn't make it to the Super Bowl, they lost in overtime in the AFC Championship game. One time to the Bengals, and then before that was to the Patriots. So, again, this Chiefs team, they've gotten very far every year. Now, that streak is going to end at some point. Those things don't last forever. But it's hard to bet against them right now. And there are people who are writing off the Chiefs all because of the beatdown they got in the Super Bowl. Listen, man, I heard that before after Super Bowl 55. I heard that after Tyreek Hill got traded. I heard it during the 23 season when they led the league in drops. The Chiefs didn't go anywhere during those seasons. They still made it far every single time. Remember when the Chiefs were supposed to fall apart after the Tyreek Hill trade? They've been to the Super Bowl all 3 years without him. So we know the Chiefs are going to be just fine. But Travis Kelce, he's in the right mindset. Really just moved on from Super Bowl 59. And I think that's what you want to hear from one of your star players. All right, preseason game coming up. Okay, here's a question I have for you guys. I need to know from all of you guys, give me 3 players. You can go more if you want, but I don't want you guys to spend too much time typing. Give me 3 players you are eager to see in Saturday's Chiefs preseason game against the Cardinals. What am I hoping to see from the Chiefs? Obviously, minimal injuries. The reality is that will happen, especially when you're using 90 players. Now, obviously, a couple guys are not going to play due to injury that you've suffered already. But you're hoping the injuries are at a minimal. The offense needs to be in sync. Obviously, they're coming off a Super Bowl where the offense certainly was not in uniform in that game. I'd like to see the offense be in unison. That certainly would be a good look here. And it's going to be interesting to see how they do that without Rice and Hollywood. I'm almost certain that even if they come back to practice tomorrow, Rice and Hollywood are not playing this Saturday. Andy Reid's not going to mess with that. No way. Absolutely not going to mess with that. Key players to watch. Here are the players I'm looking forward to seeing the most in Saturday's preseason game. I'll give you a set of players on offense and a set of players on defense, as well as special teams. Let's start with the wide receiver position, because that's been getting a lot of attention lately with injuries and some of the players on the depth making highlight reel catches. Tyquan Thornton already went over him. Obviously, he has the speed. I'm curious to see how that looks. Because this is going to be his first game with the Chiefs. Remember, last year he was on the team, but was on the practice squad after he was let go by the Patriots. Jalen Royals has been getting involved a lot with the Chiefs offense. The rookie draft pick out of the 4th round. Another rookie everyone wants to keep an eye on, including me, is Josh Simmons. How is he going to look at left tackle? This is going to be his first game in quite some time. Obviously, he had that season-ending injury last year with Ohio State. How does he look in his first game back? And this is going up against an actual opposition. Kingsley Suamataia switching from left tackle to left guard. He played some left guard last year against the Broncos. The Chiefs say they like what they saw out of him in that game. I know Jalen Moore, he's been playing a little bit of left guard. Not too much, but a little bit of that. Speaking of Jalen Moore and Juwan Taylor, both right tackles, that's another thing to keep an eye on in this game. Wanya Morris, I'm curious to see, what does he play in this game? Is he going to play left tackle or right tackle? Because he's done both. He did both for the Chiefs last year. He's done both for the Chiefs in training camp. So I'm curious to see where Wanya Morris is going to be in the first preseason game. A lot of offensive linemen for obvious reasons, of course. Tight ends. The tight end room is kind of more interesting than I thought it was going to be. Obviously, you have Jared Wiley, who I know the Chiefs really like. They drafted him last year out of TCU, had that season-ending injury. Robert Tonyan. Travis Kelce kind of gave a nice little endorsement for Robert Tonyan, calling him Big Bob. That's his nickname, I guess. And then Jake Brittingstool. Someone who's gotten involved a little bit with Patrick Mahomes in training camp this year. I shouldn't say a little bit. He's gotten involved some, actually. How is Jake Brittingstool going to look in a preseason game? I mentioned Rashee Smith, the speed he has showed off. Obviously, one of the fastest 40 times in the scouting combine this year. I'm curious to see what he looks like. Carson Steele. So the Chiefs had their unofficial depth chart come out. Carson Steele was indeed listed as a fullback. He's the only fullback on the team. Now, Carson Steele was the MVP of last year's preseason, if you want to even say that. But he looked a lot different in the regular season when he had trouble with ball security. And we didn't see much of Carson Steele once the Chiefs started using Kareem Hunt more. I think the most you ever saw Carson Steele once Hunt started to get involved was that Week 18 game. Other than that, you hardly ever saw Carson Steele last year. They used him a lot in the first few games. But when he had 3 fumbles, it became a concern, and he was a liability. How does he look in the preseason this year? We'll find out. First game this Saturday. Let's go to the defensive side of the football. I've talked about this a lot, and I'll bring it up again. Omar Norman-Lott and Ashton Gillotte. You signed Chris Jones and George Karlaftis to long-term deals. You've got your main defensive tackle and your main defensive end. They're going to be here for a few years. You just drafted 2 defensive linemen on day 2 of the draft, and Omar Norman-Lott and Ashton Gillotte. Omar Norman-Lott, of course, from Tennessee in the second round, late second round. Ashton Gillotte early in the third round from Louisville. If those 2 guys pan out and become good players, I think you got your main 4 defensive linemen set for the next few years, because you have Karlaftis and Jones on long-term deals right now. Omar Norman-Lott and Ashton Gillotte are on rookie deals, so it's almost like you have them on long-term deals, if you want to call it that. You got some guys on that defensive line there that could really serve well for you for the next few years. Another defensive lineman I want to keep an eye on, and he was low on the first unofficial depth chart that came out, Felix Anudike-Uzomah. Is this a make or break preseason for him? I think he's got to have a really good preseason to make the roster. It's getting to the point where this guy might be considered a bust. I know a lot of people weren't really too happy with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He at least had some moments in the regular season games with the Chiefs. FAU has had a couple flashes here and there, but you don't ever draft someone 31st overall for a few flashes here and there. FAU's got to step up and play better. And I think drafting Ashton Gillotte is a message to FAU. Another rookie I want to keep an eye on in this game, Noel Williams, the cornerback who the Chiefs drafted, led all college football players in interceptions last year. Now, with all these offensive highlights we've seen, that means we've seen a couple of defensive players struggle, specifically safety Brian Cook and quarterback Jalen Watson. They've certainly been on the wrong end on some of these highlights that we've seen in training camp. I'm curious to see how those 2 look in this preseason game. How much will they play? I'm curious to see as well. But they haven't looked good in training camp because they've been losing a lot of these one-on-one battles against Jalen Royals, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice. So how do they look against another team that might not have as much speed power there? Curious to see that. And then special teams, Matt Araiza, obviously they let Eddie Czapletski go, who is a reigning Ray Guy Award winner. The problem with Matt Araiza last year was the struggles with directional punting. He co-led the NFL in touchbacks last year. It's not a category you want to lead the league in. So how's Matt Araiza going to look when given an opportunity to go out there and punt the football, especially when the Chiefs offense stalls like at the 50s or on either side of the 45s? Because I doubt they're going to go for a field goal at that point. And that's when we could see Matt Araiza try to pin them in their own territory and not let it go for a touchback. Also, special teams, that's going to be important as well. Nico Remigio, he had a couple of big returns in the playoffs last year. You also have Rashee Smith, who showcased his speed and is someone who's going to be used on special teams. In fact, he was on the depth chart for kick returns and punt returns. Maybe we see Tyquan Thornton. I know Sky Moore's taken some returns back in training camp. Maybe we see those guys a little bit, but I'm curious to see how the special teams return unit goes, because the Chiefs have not had a standout returner in quite some time. I mean, I would say their last best returner was probably Tyreek Hill. And they moved him away from that so he could focus more as a wide receiver. I mean, listen, if the Chiefs wanted to leave Tyreek Hill in there as their primary returner, he could have easily done a lot of the things that we saw from Dante Hall and Devin Hester in years past. But the Chiefs don't want to use someone that is the primary guy as a special team returner and on offense or defense. And we see the Chiefs use more offensive players for the return game than defensive players. Who was the last defensive player to get a kick return touchdown for the Chiefs? I want to say Quentin Demps off the top of my head. I know the Chiefs drafted a couple of defensive players in 2022 that had experience with returns, but we haven't seen the Chiefs use them in the return game. It's mostly been offensive players here. The Chiefs, I'm not saying they have to be great like Dante Hall, but we got to see somebody out there. I know they tried that with McCole Hardman. They were hopeful he could be that guy. I know he made the Pro Bowl 1 year as a returner, but that was just 1 year. We haven't really seen much of that. I know Xavier Worthy was getting some consideration. I think Nico Remigio or Brashard Smith could ultimately be one of those guys. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. So that's my list of guys. Obviously, a long list. How much playing time will the starters get? In years past, for the first preseason game, Andy Reid has said that the offense will play the first quarter, but it really ends up being just a series. So I'm expecting just one drive, even if it's a 3-and-out or Mahomes throws a pick on the first play of the game. Maybe you see a second series, but I'm not really anticipating it. I don't think Andy Reid wants to risk anything, especially last year on the very first preseason snap. Hollywood Brown had that injury. That sucked, obviously, especially with how long-term that injury turned out to be. I know this is a big story, especially with the Bengals, because the thought is they got off to slow starts in years past because they didn't utilize their starters more in preseason games, and now they're going to. I mean, listen, how much do we really need to see Mahomes, Kelsey, Jones, those guys? Mahomes, specifically with the new little look you've got with your offensive line, I'd like to see a second series, especially with some of the young guys that haven't had as much experience too, like Tyquan Thornton and Jalen Royals. But I'm only anticipating one offensive series with those guys. And I think defensively, expect a series from the starters there. Maybe a couple guys play from the ones play a little bit in the second series. But overall, don't expect to see too much of the starters. In other words, it could get boring pretty quickly if you're really only in it for the starters. And by the way, I'm not going to shame any Chiefs fans. I know other Chiefs fans do this. I'm not going to shame a Chiefs fan for not wanting to watch the rest of the preseason. I mean, let's be real. With all due respect to the second, third, and fourth string guys, who really pays that close attention? I mean, if you're in the media or if you're one of those bloggers, I get it. But man, even as a podcaster, I don't focus too much on those kinds of things. It's just, I mean, come on. What are we doing at that point? Let me see what you guys said. Eric says, I want to see the defensive backs go crazy. Steve said Simmons, Royals, Thornton. Those are probably the three guys a lot of people want to see. Robert says, I'd like to see backup QB shine in case Mahomes get hurt. Knock on wood. Yeah, that's true. Layla says Simmons and Royals. Eric says Royals, Thornton, and Smith. Duncan says Elijah Mitchell is the most at risk of being cut. Maybe if you keep Steele as a fullback, I could see that actually. They're not cutting Pacheco. They're not cutting Rashard Smith. Those are guys on rookie deals. Kareem Hunt's on a very team-friendly deal. I don't see the Chiefs letting him go. Yeah, I would imagine it's between Mitchell and Hunt, unless they're willing to keep another running back. But yeah, I could see that, Duncan. Dan says, go on record. Who ends the season with more sacks this season, Jones or Karlaftis? I'll go Jones on that one. I see FAU being a Chicago Bear at some point, and it makes sense considering the connection there. Ogle says, if the O-line can protect Mahomes, Chiefs offense will be explosive. I do agree. I do agree. Have I seen anything from Lovett and Izzard? Not really. Do you think we'll see much of Bassa? Haven't heard much about him in training camp. He's done well. And let me say this about the defense overall in general. The run defense has been very good in camp. The Chiefs running backs have not been able to really show off much in the ground game because of how good the Chiefs run defense is. By the way, do you know how many games it's been since the Chiefs last allowed a running back to rush for 100 yards? 26 games. We mentioned that Christmas game earlier when talking about AP, Antonio Pierce. Zamir White from that Christmas game against the Raiders, he's the last running back to rush for 100 yards. Now, Lamar Jackson did rush for 100 yards against the Chiefs, but he's not a running back. He's a quarterback. I know there's a joke somewhere in there about Jackson and him being a running back or not, but he's a quarterback. He's the last player, or the only player, to rush for 100 on the Chiefs. That was the game where Isaiah likely stepped out of bounds, by the way. So, yeah, that Chiefs run defense has been good. And to answer your question about Bassa, he's had some moments in camp, not a whole lot. But, yeah, expect him to play some in the once the starters get off the field. What team do I think in the AFC is the biggest threat this year? In the AFC, I mean, I've got to go with Buffalo. And I know Buffalo gets the hype every year, but I mean, until then, I just don't know. Cincinnati, if they can figure things out, sure, they could certainly be a threat. Everyone keeps saying Baltimore. Listen, Baltimore's had a lot of great regular seasons with Lamar Jackson, but what have they had to show for it in the playoffs? The Ravens just don't scare me because every year when we think they're going to get over the hump, they don't. The best returner the Chiefs have had was Kadarius Toney in Super Bowl 57. That's the best return we've seen. Now, has Kadarius Toney been the best returner since then? I mean, in the Patrick Mahomes era, who's been the best returner? I don't know if there's one clear-cut standout guy. I mean, sure, Kadarius Toney has the record for longest punt return in Super Bowl history, but that's the only thing he had for the Chiefs is that one massive punt return. I know McCole Hardman had a kick return touchdown, and I mentioned earlier he had the Pro Bowl his rookie year, not as a receiver, as a Pro Bowler. Now, when receivers, when they get into the Pro Bowl as a returner, yeah, they end up playing some wide receiver. I know Dante Hall, he would play the wide receiver. Not that anyone cares about that thing, but yeah, I'd like to see someone just stand out. Like the Chiefs always bring in guys with the speed, so they have that on their team. Can we see it work finally at the return position? I'd like to see that. Before I get out of here, there's something that everyone should be aware of here. ESPN has been making some big moves, 2 big splashes recently. They have landed the NFL Red Zone channel. That is huge news. NFL Red Zone, for those not familiar with Red Zone, it's basically Scott Hansen, who does a phenomenal job with this for 6.5 hours. They basically start with the 12 o'clock kickoff games. They try to show as much as they can. And it's obviously not exactly live. It's a little bit delayed so they can take the time to show you what they need to show you. They basically show you every single highlight you need to see from NFL games. Now, it's basically organized chaos for the 12 o'clock kickoff games because there are a bunch of games happening then. The 325 games, it's a little less chaotic because there are fewer games then, and they're able to do split screens. I'll watch Red Zone sometimes, but me personally, I do prefer the multi-box. And unfortunately, YouTube TV does not do a good job of that, whereas DirecTV did. But I preferred being able to see multiple games at once in their entirety. Some people prefer Red Zone. Hey, perfectly fine. Everyone's got their own preference here. But a lot of people are concerned that the Red Zone product is going to change drastically. Now, Roger Goodell said it won't change much and that fans won't notice a difference. I'm not really sure how much I'll take Roger Goodell's word on that. That's the first big concern. By the way, the NFL also procured, according to the Wall Street Journal, an ownership stake in CBS through its merger with Skydance. That's also a big deal. Now, the other part of this because the NFL now has ownership stake in ESPN and now CBS. What does that do for the coverage? Is that going to change at all? Are guys like Dan Orlovsky, Sam Ponder, Bill Cower, James Brown, all those people you hear during the pregame show or whatever ESPN or CBS does with their sports coverage, how much does that change? Because I don't like this part of it, of the deal. I don't like that the NFL, and this has been rumored that it could happen for a while, that the league has an ownership stake of the network. A network and a sports league should be two whole separate entities. There should never be an ownership stake at all from the league. And now that the media is part of 10% of that ownership stake is owned by the league, I'm a little concerned here. I mean, listen, you've heard me criticize local media and how they do their jobs. But now you have a big network like ESPN, and I know people will have their opinions about ESPN and whatnot. The reality is a lot of people still will tune in and listen to what those pundits have to say, whether they like it or not, because everyone wants to hear those opinions, good or bad. I don't know what this really does. I'm actually eager to pay attention to ESPN more just to see if the coverage changes at all. Because if Roger Goodell does something that needs to be called out, will ESPN call it out? Or are their pundits going to be too scared of that kind of thing? Now, this is not the only thing that ESPN has acquired. ESPN has also landed WWE premier live events. So events like WrestleMania, the Royal Rumble, SummerSlam, which they had this past weekend, Survivor Series, those major events are considered WWE premier live events or WWE PLEs. And I'll say this, because the UFC, I still remember around 05, 06, 07, or right around that time, the UFC landed on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and that was a huge deal at the time. People wondered if the sport was, making a turn. Remember, the UFC, MMA in general, was banned at a lot of states, at a lot of venues. And the UFC's come a long way. They're still growing from a public standpoint, but they're in a far better place now than they were 15, 20 years ago. WWE, dude, remember the 2000s? Some of the things that came out about WWE, and then the death of Chris Benoit, the murder, homicide, suicide incident. That was a dark cloud over WWE and the professional wrestling industry. WWE's come a very long way since then. And I think it helps when you have people like John Cena, who does a shit ton of Make-A-Wish Foundation fulfillments. I know Pat McAfee's not with the WWE at this moment. I think he's taking a break because of burnout with his work and whatnot. Oddly enough, he called out this little partnership here, but with what Pat McAfee does and his popularity, him being part of WWE's commentary team, I think has really helped the growth of WWE as well. And maybe not the growth, but at least from a PR standpoint. And there are so many other things. WWE is in a far different place PR-wise. The fact that WWE has signed a deal with ESPN is a huge deal. And even before today, you would see WWE guests on ESPN shows. I mean, Seth Rollins was recently on the Rich Eisen show. I mean, you have wrestlers who are guests on shows on ESPN, Fox Sports, and even on radio shows. Like whenever the Super Bowl is going on, the week of the Super Bowl at Radio Row, sometimes you have WWE superstars at these events, and they're getting interviewed by all these radio stations. The industry, I don't want to call it a sport, but it's sports entertainment. It's under that umbrella of combat sports. It's come a very long way. I mean, you go to ESPN's website, there's WWE coverage on there. You did not have that 10, 15, 20 years ago. So ESPN, man, whether you like the way some of these moves are being made or not with the NFL ownership and whatnot, ESPN now became an even bigger time player here. Now, this does require federal regulatory approval, meaning Will President Donald Trump approve of all of this? There's been some question about this, especially with ESPN being owned by Disney. Is this something the president will allow, especially with the culture and whatnot, and what some people think of Disney? That remains to be seen. By the way, the UFC deal with ESPN is still up in the deal, whether that'll be renewed or not. But Stephen A. Smith, who doesn't know jack shit about UFC, how many times have you seen Stephen A. cover the UFC? The only time I ever saw it was right when they started the partnership, and then when Conor McGregor, who's obviously a big part of the sport, even though he's been inactive for quite some time, when he had that fight against Donald Cerrone, Stephen A. Smith injected himself into the coverage there because he's Stephen A. Smith. You got to have your biggest face from ESPN there so he can cover the event for the network. Now, if you listen to Stephen A.'s commentary, it's pretty bad. He doesn't know what he's talking about very clearly. Joe Rogan even called it out. But guess what? When WrestleMania comes around, guess who's going to be doing some of the coverage? Stephen A. Smith. This is the same guy who is clearly on his phone during the NBA Finals playing freaking solitaire. And this guy's going to be injected into pro wrestling, which I doubt he knows much about. I mean, listen, if he doesn't watch wrestling, fine. That's okay. But don't put this guy as the centerpiece of your WWE coverage for WrestleMania when the guy doesn't know anything about the sport. Now, the WWE and the UFC, they love having Stephen A. there. Just even though what he could say is dumb and stupid, they don't care because that's more eyes on their sport, on their industry. That's all they care about. I'm just not a big fan of this. And by the way, props to the NFL. Because when the NFL says that Apple and Google are their competitors, oh boy, is that not the biggest slap and a backslap to the NBA or Major League Baseball or any other sport? The NFL is literally out there saying, no NBA, no college sports, you're not our competitors. Apple and Google are our competitors, which is weird to say because don't we all use Apple devices, or a majority of us, to stream games, to look up NFL news, or to play fantasy football or bet on games? We Google stuff about the NFL. I mean, it's kind of weird that he said that, but he feels like he's in a league with those two markets, or industries rather, whatever you want to call it. By the way, as ESPN prepares for the launch of a new direct-to-consumer streaming service, yes, we're getting a new streaming service, or DTC is what they're calling it for short. It's going to be $29.99 per month. The company has struck a deal to begin broadcast of WWE's PLEs starting in 2026. And I think NFL Red Zone might have some part in that for the future as well. Remember that streaming service that was supposed to launch last fall, and they wanted to have a hand in every sport, and they got stopped? How did that happen? Like, what happened to that? Their target was to come out in the fall. Didn't happen. Dude, if you want to watch NFL games, you need YouTube TV for Sunday Ticket, Prime for Thursday night games, Peacock, ESPN Plus for occasional games, and now this ESPN DTC deal possibly for Red Zone. Oh boy. Listen, we all know streaming is the future and all of that. And if you're someone that watches every sport closely, like if you literally watch everything, like the NFL, NBA, even Major League Soccer, college sports, everything, you got to basically have every streaming service now at this point. WWE, because they're exclusively on Netflix. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, a couple of NFL games are going to be exclusively on Netflix. Forgot about that one. I know people don't like it, but that is the direction we're going in. And even if the NFL changes the Red Zone product, guess what? There's nothing any amount of outcry will do to change it. You want to know how you can speak up against the NFL if they ruin Red Zone? By not watching the NFL. Is anyone actually going to do that? No. The NFL and ESPN can do whatever they want with Red Zone. And it's not going to matter because we're all still going to watch. We're still going to watch football. We're still going to pay attention. We're still going to bet on games. We're still going to play fantasy football. We're going to talk about it on social media. We're still going to buy the tickets and the merchandise. So until proven otherwise, ESPN and the NFL, especially with that 10% ownership stake, they can do whatever the hell they want. That's what happens when the elite become more elite. Hey, before I get out of here, real quickly, I want to let you know about the Duran Cherry Game Day Give Back Watch Party that will take place at Weston, Missouri at Holiday Distillery here. This is going to be a really cool event here. Duran Cherry, Chiefs Hall of Famer, he's going to be there having a watch party. You can watch games with him. And you can buy your tickets right here. I just commented with the link below. So if you guys want to get tickets to this event, to my understanding, they're starting to sell out here. It's going to be at Holiday Distillery, Chiefs versus the Chargers, September the 5th. Doors open 6 p.m. That's going to be a Friday night. Go check it out. Watch games with Duran Cherry and other Chiefs alums that'll be there as well. So if you haven't done so already, buy your tickets. If you're going to be in the area, you want to make a drive to Weston, Missouri at Holiday Distillery, check it out with Duran Cherry and other Chiefs alums as well. What am I going to do to celebrate 150,000 followers? I don't know. Should we do anything? Should we do a giveaway, something cool like that? I don't know, man. I will say this. The content recently, and obviously it's football season, so that helps a lot. But, dude, the content is at an all-time high. Recently this off season, the amount of comments, video views, podcast views, all of that stuff, and obviously with the season starting up, that's expected. But I think more so a lot of new followers on Facebook, YouTube, X, Instagram, everywhere. Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate everyone, whether you've been following since day one or you started following today. A lot of new faces here, so I do appreciate everyone that has joined the club. Never too late. If you haven't already, please let a friend know. Invite your friends to the fun. We're gonna have a lot of fun this year covering the Chiefs. I say covering, but I'm not actually there covering. We're talking about the Chiefs, I should say. And yeah, we're continuing to go like a skyrocket, man. I remember last September we hit 100,000, and I think we're at 140 something. I don't keep a close eye on that. I know we're getting to 150. But yeah, we'll probably do something bigger for 200. That'd be more significant. But I do appreciate all the love. If you haven't already, please let a friend know over the podcast. Share the links, share the social media clips. All of that greatly helps a lot when you guys like, comment, share, all those stuff. It really does help a lot. Until then, my name is Farzin Vasugian. I will talk to you all this Friday evening for the Red Friday Q&A live chat. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. I'll talk to you all later. Peace out.